He regretted marrying me, until he learned I was carrying his twin heirs ***. Chapter 1, The Signature. The pen shook in my hand. I had imagined this moment would hurt. I had not imagined it would happen on a Tuesday afternoon, in a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, while my husband stared at me like I was a stain he couldn't wash out. "Sign it, Elias," Alexander said. He looked beautiful even when he was cruel. Black hair swept back, jaw tight, gray eyes cold enough to freeze the tea in front of me. Cedar and black pepper thickened in the air, his anger, his alpha command. It pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. 11 months, I whispered. That's all it took for you to hate me. I don't hate you. He pushed the divorce papers closer. I regret marrying you. There's a difference. Our lawyers sat at the far end of the table. All male, all silent. Mr. Mercer, Alexander's attorney, avoided my gaze. My own lawyer, Ben, looked ready to argue, but I raised a hand. It's fine, I said. I'll sign. I picked up the pen. The first page was the settlement offer, a lump sum, the Manhattan condo, and a car I didn't want. The second page was the divorce decree. The third was a non-disclosure agreement. The room swayed. I blinked, trying to focus. The words blurred. My stomach rolled, and a sharp pain, hot and tight, clenched low in my belly. I had felt sick all morning, but I had blamed it on the fight the night before, when Alexander had told me he was filing for divorce. Elias? My lawyer's voice came from far away. I opened my mouth to say I was fine. Instead, the pen slipped from my fingers. The floor tilted. I heard Alexander's chair scrape, heard him say my name, not coldly, not politely, but the sound was already fading. Then everything went black. Chapter 2, The Twins. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of a heart monitor. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I saw the ceiling, the 4 in my arm, and the face of a man in a white coat standing at the foot of the bed. "Mr. Thorne," the doctor said. "I'm Dr. Hale. You fainted, but you're stable now." I tried to sit up. A hand pressed gently on my shoulder, easing me back. I turned and found Alexander standing beside the bed. His face was pale. His tie was loose. For the first time in weeks, he looked at me without contempt. "You need to lie still," he said. I stared at him. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm still your husband." "You were my husband when you asked for a divorce," I said. My voice came out rough. "You don't get to play concerned now." Dr. Hale cleared his throat. "Mr. Thorne, the fainting wasn't caused by stress alone. Your blood pressure is low, and your body is under strain because of the pregnancy." The word hit me like a glass wall. "What?" "You're pregnant," Dr. Hale said. "Approximately 8 weeks along. And there's something else." He glanced at Alexander, then back at me. "It's twins." The monitor beeped in the sudden silence. Twins. I pressed a hand to my stomach without thinking. Beneath the thin hospital blanket, there was no visible change, but something deep inside me shifted, not physically, but in my chest. A strange, terrifying warmth. Alexander made a sound, low and wounded. I turned. His eyes were fixed on my stomach, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw his mask crack. "Say it again," he said. "Twins," Dr. Hale repeated. "Both heartbeats are strong. But the pregnancy is high risk, Mr. Thorne. Your mate's body is under significant stress. He needs rest, reduced emotional strain, and an alpha's presence to stabilize his hormones." Your mate. The words felt like a cruel joke. 11 months of marriage, and Alexander had never acted like my mate. He had slept in the guest room for most of it. He had looked at me with polite distance at first, then cold suspicion, then something sharper. "We'll get a second opinion," Alexander said. I laughed, and it hurt. "Why? So you can find a doctor who tells you I'm lying?" He flinched. Alexander Thorne, the man who had never once flinched in a boardroom, flinched. "Elias," he said. "Don't." I pushed myself up despite the doctor's warning. "Sign the papers, Alexander. I'll raise them alone. You can have your regret and your freedom. I won't use our children as chains." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The room tilted again, but I forced myself to stand. Bad decision. My knees buckled. Alexander caught me before I hit the floor. His arms came around me, strong and warm, and his scent, cedar, black pepper, and something I had missed for months, surrounded me. I hated how safe it felt. I hated that my body leaned into him before my mind could stop it. "You're not going anywhere," he said against my hair. "Not with my children." There it was. The real reason. "Your heirs," I corrected bitterly. "That's all they are to you." "No," his hand came to my stomach, flat and possessive. "That's not what I meant." But I didn't believe him. Chapter 3, The Paperwork. Alexander didn't leave the hospital room. He stood against the wall during every test, watched every ultrasound, and when the technician pointed out 2 tiny flickering heartbeats, his hand found mine and held on so tightly my fingers ached. I pulled away. He didn't let go. "You need to stop," I said. "I can't. You were ready to divorce me 2 hours ago." He turned to face me, and for a second, the cold mask was gone. What remained was something raw and afraid. "2 hours ago, I thought I'd lost you. Then you fainted, and I thought I'd killed you." "You didn't lose me," I said quietly. "You threw me away." Alexander's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, and the space between us became electric. His hand came up, not to my stomach, but to my face. His thumb brushed over my cheekbone, leaving a trail of heat. "I am not signing anything," he said. "Then I'll file." "Elias." His voice dropped, alpha command curling through it. "I will contest. I will delay. I will chain myself to this marriage until you understand that I am not letting you go." I should have been angry. I was angry. But my body betrayed me, leaning toward his scent, my omega instinct screaming to accept, to nest, to let him protect. "You don't get to do this," I whispered. "You don't get to regret me and then keep me because I'm pregnant. I don't care about the heirs." His hand slid from my face to the back of my neck, pulling me until our foreheads touched. "I care about you. I should have said it months ago. I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, fragile and too late. I closed my eyes. "Prove it." "How?" "Let me go to my father's house. Give me space. If you can do that, I'll believe you care." Alexander's grip tightened. "No. Then we have nothing to say." A knock on the door interrupted us. A male nurse came in with discharge papers, and Alexander signed them before I could say another word. He took my bag, took my arm, and led me out of the hospital like I was a prisoner. "You can't keep me," I said in the car. "I'm not keeping you." He fastened my seatbelt himself, hands careful over my stomach. "I'm taking you home." "Our home?" I asked. "Or the condo you gave me in the divorce settlement?" His mouth thinned. "There is no settlement. I burned it." I stared at him. "You burned legal documents?" "I burned the lie that said I could live without you." He started the car and pulled into traffic. "Now, stop fighting me and rest." I wanted to fight him. But exhaustion pressed down like a heavy blanket, and the motion of the car, the warmth of his hand still resting on my knee, pulled me under. When I woke, I was in his bed. Not the guest room. His bed. And Alexander was stretched out beside me, one arm around my waist, his palm pressed to my stomach. "Sleep," he murmured without opening his eyes. "I've got you." I should have left. Instead, I closed my eyes and let myself feel, just for a moment, what it might be like to be wanted. Chapter 4, The House. The Thorne estate sat on a private drive in Connecticut, a stone mansion surrounded by oaks. I had lived there for 11 months and never once felt like it was mine. Alexander carried me from the car. Literally. I woke when the engine stopped, tried to get out, and found myself lifted against his chest before my feet touched the ground. "I can walk," I said. "You fainted yesterday. You're high risk. You can argue later." He carried me through the front door, past the housekeeper, a man named Paul, and up the grand staircase. His arms didn't shake. His scent was all around me, steady and possessive. He set me on his bed. Not the guest room. His bed. Then he crouched in front of me, hands on my knees. "Elias," he said. "I need you to listen. I know you don't trust me. I know I haven't earned it. But for the next few days, I need you to let me take care of you. Not because of the twins. Because I can't breathe when you're not safe." I looked away. "You were ready to let me go this morning." "I was a fool this morning." He caught my chin and turned my face back. "And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. But first, I need you to stay." Stay. The word wrapped around me, warm and dangerous. My omega instincts preened. My heart remembered every cold night, every dinner eaten alone, every time I had reached for him and found empty sheets. "I need time," I said. "Then take it." He stood, then leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. The kiss was soft, lingering, full of something I couldn't name. "But don't shut me out. Not now." The door closed behind him, and I touched my forehead, hating the way my pulse raced. A knock came a few hours later. I expected Alexander. Instead, a tall man with dark hair and a too-sharp smile leaned against the doorframe. "Elias," Victor Thorne said. "I heard the news. Twins. Congratulations. Alexander's cousin." He was all polished charm and hidden knives. I had never trusted him. "What do you want, Victor?" "Only to see how you're doing." He stepped inside, eyes roaming over the room, over me. "You know, I always thought Alexander would come to his senses and leave you. Now I understand why he's trapped." "I'm not trapping him." "Of course not." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But those little heirs certainly do." Before I could respond, Alexander appeared in the doorway. The temperature dropped. "Victor." His voice was ice. "Get out." Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just welcoming the mother of your children. Apologies. I'll leave the happy couple alone." The word mother was a deliberate insult. I felt my face heat. Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides, putting himself between us, his chest against my back. "Don't come near him again," Alexander said. Victor left, but his smile lingered. That night, Alexander held me while I slept. I didn't ask him to. I didn't ask him to leave. His palm rested on my stomach, and for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. Chapter 5, The Photograph. The truth came out on a Thursday. I found the photograph in Alexander's study. Not hidden. It was lying on his desk, creased from being handled too many times. It showed me in a hotel corridor, crying, wrapped in another man's arms. My brother Marcus. The same photo I had heard whispers about, the reason Alexander had started looking at me with ice in his eyes. I was holding it when Alexander walked in. He stopped. "Where did you get that?" "It was on your desk." My voice shook. "This is why you regretted marrying me. You thought I was having an affair." He didn't deny it. He crossed the room, took the photo from my hand, and set it face down. "Who gave it to you?" I asked. "Victor." "Of course. That's Marcus," I said. "My brother. Our father had just been diagnosed with cancer. Marcus found me in the hallway after I got the call. I was crying. He was holding me. That's all it was." Alexander's face went gray. "You never told me your father was sick." I tried. "You didn't want to hear it." I swallowed. "You'd already decided I was a gold digger. You stopped asking questions. You stopped looking at me unless it was to find fault." He reached for me, but I stepped back. The space between us felt like a chasm. "I hired an investigator," he said quietly. "After you fainted. After the twins. I needed to know the truth." He confirmed it. "Marcus came to see me this afternoon." "You talked to my brother?" I listened. He moved closer, slowly, like I was a wounded animal. "Elias, I am so sorry. I let a lie poison us. I let my own fear and my family's poison convince me that you didn't love me. I was wrong. You wanted to divorce me because you thought I cheated," I said. "You said you regretted marrying me. You didn't even ask." "I know." His hands closed around my arms, not hard, but desperate. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I will earn it. Not because of the twins. Because you are the only thing in my life that has ever felt like home." His forehead dropped to mine. His breath was warm, uneven. "Tell me how to fix this," he whispered. I didn't have an answer. But I didn't pull away. Later that night, I lay in bed with Alexander's arm around my waist. He hadn't tried to kiss me. He hadn't pushed. He just held me, and when I shifted in the dark, his hand moved to my stomach, tracing slow circles through my shirt. "I used to dream about this," he said. "You, pregnant with our children." I told myself it was just biology. An alpha's instinct. But it was never about the heirs. Then what was it about? You. He pressed his lips to the back of my neck. "It was always you." I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I let myself believe him. Chapter 6, The Fall. Victor didn't take the rejection well. A week later, I was in the garden when he found me. Alexander had left for an emergency meeting in the city, and I was too restless to stay inside. Victor appeared on the path, hands in his pockets. "You really did it, didn't you? Turned my cousin into your slave." "I didn't do anything," I said. "You got pregnant with twin heirs. That's something." He stepped closer. "But here's the thing, Elias. The Thorne family doesn't need you. My uncle, Alexander's grandfather, will never accept an Omega who traps his way into the line of succession. And when those twins are born, you'll be discarded. Just wait." I turned to leave. He grabbed my wrist. "You're wrong about Alexander," I said. "Am I?" His grip tightened. "He regretted marrying you once. He'll regret you again." I tried to pull free. Victor's other hand came up, not to hit me, but to shove. I didn't fall then. He stepped back, smirking, and in the next second, his foot hooked around my ankle. I fell hard on the stone path. Pain exploded through my hip and lower back. Victor's smile vanished. "I didn't mean to." "Elias." Alexander's voice came from somewhere behind us. I heard running footsteps, felt the ground shake. Then he was there, lifting me, hands frantic, voice cracked. "Call an ambulance," he shouted. "Now!" Victor tried to speak. "It was an accident." He tripped. Alexander didn't look at him. His eyes were on me, wild with fear. "Stay with me. Stay awake." My stomach cramped. I grabbed his shirt. "The babies. They're going to be fine." He pressed his hand over mine, over my stomach, and I felt his palm tremble. "I've got you. I've got all of you." Then the pain pulled me under. At the hospital, Dr. Hale said the twins were safe. The fall had bruised my hip and strained muscles, but the babies were protected. I needed bed rest. Alexander stayed. He didn't leave for meetings. He didn't sleep. He sat in the chair beside my bed, holding my hand, and when the doctor mentioned the word, criminal charges, his face went murderous. "I'll handle Victor," he said. "Don't do anything stupid. He touched you. He could have killed you." Alexander leaned over me, one hand bracing the bed, the other cupping my jaw. "I will burn the world down for you, Elias. Don't ask me not to." I caught his wrist. "Then stay here. I don't need the world burned. I need you." Something in his eyes shifted. He lowered his head until our brows touched, and for a moment, the only sound was our breathing. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not ever again." Chapter 7, The Mark. After the hospital, Alexander moved me back to the estate but into a different room, the suite next to his, with a connecting door. He said I needed rest. He didn't say he was terrified to let me out of his sight. He slept in the chair beside my bed. Every night, his hand found my stomach. Every morning, he kissed my forehead before I woke. It was suffocating and wonderful and confusing. One evening, I reached for him. Not out of need, but because I missed the warmth of his chest against my back. "Lie down with me," I said. He hesitated. "I don't want to hurt you." "You won't." He climbed into bed carefully, as if I were made of glass. Then he pulled me against his chest, and I melted into him. His hand rested on the curve of my belly, which had finally begun to show. "I can feel them move," he whispered. "Just barely. Like butterfly wings." "You can't. It's too early." "Then maybe it's my heart." I laughed, and it startled us both. It had been so long. Alexander shifted behind me, and I felt his lips at the side of my neck, over my scent gland. My breath hitched. "Elias," he said. "I want to mark you. Not as a claim. As a promise." I turned in his arms. His eyes were dark, intense, full of something that looked like love and terror. "You already have the right," I said. "We're married." "I want your permission," he said. "I want you to choose me. Not because of contracts or heirs. Because you want me." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I tilted my head, baring my throat. "I want you," I said. His control broke. He kissed me, soft at first, then deeper, one hand cradling the back of my head. His lips moved to my jaw, then lower, and when his teeth grazed my scent gland, I gasped. The bite was quick, sharp, and then a flood of warmth spread through my body. Alpha and Omega. Mate. He licked the mark, pressed his forehead to my shoulder, and trembled. "Mine," he said. "You're mine." "I always was," I said. Chapter 8, The Heir. Alexander's grandfather Silas summoned us to the city. He was a cold old man with silver hair and eyes like winter. "So this is the Omega who trapped my grandson," Silas said. "Grandfather," Alexander warned. "I won't pretend to approve," Silas continued. "But the twins are Thorn blood. They will be born in this family. Alexander will raise them with you, but I want a prenuptial agreement that protects the estate. Alexander's hand found mine. No. Excuse me? No more agreements. No more protecting the estate at the cost of my marriage. Alexander stood, pulling me to my feet. Elias is not a trap. He is my mate. You can accept that or you can lose me. Silas's eyes narrowed. You would choose this Omega over the company? I would choose him over everything. Alexander's voice didn't shake. I already did. I just didn't know it. The old man stared at us for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. You have your father's stubbornness, he said. Very well. Bring your mate to dinner next Sunday. We will discuss the twins' future as a family. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. On the way home, Alexander held my hand the entire drive. When we stopped at a red light, he leaned over and kissed my knuckles. I meant it, he said. You over everything. You'll regret it, I said, but I was smiling. Never. He kissed me again. Marrying you was the only right thing I've ever done. I was just too stupid to see it. Chapter 9, The Labor. The twins came early, at 34 weeks. I woke in the night with a pain that stole my breath. Alexander was up before I could speak, his hand on my stomach, his voice calm even as his eyes went wide. I'm calling the ambulance, he said. I'm fine, I lied. You're pale and you're shaking. He lifted me against his chest, kissed my temple. You're not fine. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Alexander held me in the back of the ambulance, one hand gripping mine, the other pressed to my stomach. He didn't stop talking, nonsense, mostly. I love you. Stay with me. I can't do this without you. The babies, I said through gritted teeth. They're coming, Dr. Hale said, appearing in scrubs. We need to do an emergency C-section. I felt a spike of terror. Alexander's face went white. I'll be right outside, he said, but I grabbed his wrist. Don't leave me. I won't. He looked at the doctor. I'm going with him. Alexander, the surgical team. I don't care. His voice was iron. I'm not leaving my mate. In the operating room, he held my hand behind the drape, his other hand on my forehead, his lips moving in whispered promises. I couldn't hear all of it over the beeping and the doctors, but I heard one thing clearly. I love you, Elias. I've loved you since the day I saw you, and I was too much of a coward to say it. Don't you dare leave me. Then there was a cry. Then another. Two voices, small and furious, filled the room. They're here, Dr. Hale said. Two boys. Both breathing on their own. Alexander made a sound, half laugh, half sob. He pressed his forehead to mine, tears dripping onto my cheeks. You did it, he said. You gave me everything. We did it, I whispered. Chapter 10, The Epilogue. 6 months later, I woke to the sound of laughter. Not just any laughter. Alexander's laughter, low and warm, and the gurgling coos of two small voices. I opened my eyes to find my husband sitting in the rocking chair by the window, one baby in each arm. Noah and Gabriel. Noah had Alexander's gray eyes. Gabriel had my dark hair. Both were perfect. Alexander looked up and caught me watching. His smile softened. Good morning, love. Morning. I stretched, then winced, the scar still pulled if I moved too fast. Alexander was beside me in an instant, transferring both babies to the bassinet with practiced ease. What did the doctor say about moving slowly? He sat on the edge of the bed, hands on my waist, easing me up. That I'm allowed to get out of bed alone. Not on my watch. He kissed me, soft and sweet, then lingered. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I was thinking. Dangerous. He laughed. I was thinking about the day I asked you to sign the divorce papers. I almost threw away the only real thing I've ever had. You didn't. I reached up and touched his face. And I wouldn't have signed. You had the pen in your hand. I was going to sign because I loved you too much to force you to stay. I swallowed. But I never would have stopped loving you. Alexander's arms came around me, careful and strong. He pulled me against his chest, and I felt his lips in my hair. I regret every day I made you feel unwanted, he said. But I will never regret marrying you. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Noah started to fuss. Then Gabriel joined in. We pulled apart, laughing, and Alexander pressed a final kiss to my forehead before scooping both boys up. Papa's hungry, he said to them. Let's go make him breakfast. I watched him carry our sons out of the room, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. He regretted marrying me once. But he had spent every day since making sure I never doubted him again.